Welcome to the Eco. My name is Jacob Wolf, and I'm your host, and this is the weekly ESPN eSports Counter-Strike Global Offensive show. Glad to be with you this week. We got some special stuff coming up for you. We had to pre-record earlier because the ladies were unable to make this time, but I got the opportunity to sit down and talk with missharvey and sapphiRe of CLG and Dignitas respectively, and it was a really good and thorough conversation that I enjoyed having with them about their experiences and sort of what it's like to be a female professional in Counter-Strike, both on the executive side as they are now. If you're unfamiliar, sapphiRe is a vice president at Dignitas and missharvey is a director at CLG. But both of them are also former female Counter-Strike players, top of their class in that regard previously as well. So we got to talk into a breadth of topics. But that's the big chunk of today's show. I also want to talk later in the show about what's going on with Valve, and they've been patching a lot more recently, and I can't help but think that's a little bit because of Valorant. But first, we're going to go to a quick be right back. We're going to come back with the interview that I had with missharvey and with sapphiRe. Now we're going to welcome on sapphiRe and missharvey, two of the most successful female Counter-Strike players of all time, and now transition both into respective executive roles within their companies. Ladies, welcome on to the Eco.
Thanks for having us.
So I wanted to invite you all on. This is going to be a serious conversation. I think both of you, having heard you speak before to this, have really thoughtful opinions about it and also personal experiences in sort of this lane. I saw a couple weeks ago, about a week and a half ago, that Pansy, after casting some Valorant, had posted a picture about her coming back in casting Counter-Strike, and it was like her, the meme was her dressing up in a hazmat suit and preparing for all the Twitch chat comments, which she later clarified was in part because she had been casting another game, and separately, and the far worse part of that, which is because she is a woman. So I want to ask this, having heard you all talk about this for many years, where do you think we as an industry stand right now, specifically in Counter-Strike, in terms of respecting women and giving them opportunities within the industry and sort of propelling them to succeed?
I'll start Sapphire.
Yeah, I'll go.
Sure.
I think that when it comes to giving women more opportunities, we're working on it. We're doing a little bit better, but it goes both ways. We need kind of to be given opportunities for talent to rise up. Not saying that every woman that would be on shows would be good enough to be on the shows, but to get those women on the shows, for them to get better and improve and really grow, you need to give them any kind of platform. And at the moment, I think that in Counter-Strike, we are fortunate to have a couple, even as hosts, interviewers, and or analysts, whether it's Pansy, Potter. Heather was doing a lot of the behind the scene. I actually don't know if you're still doing observing, Heather, if you're too busy.
A little here and there.
But you definitely raised up the bar when you were working in that department. But, I think if you compare it to their esports right now, Counter-Strike is probably middle of the pack. We do have women that are respected, but we could do better. I think we'll start with that. Then we can talk about the community and the reception to women, but we'll start with that.
Sure, and I echo those thoughts. Steph and I both come up from a place in a time where we were often the only woman in the room or in the server, and that's certainly changing. It's getting better, but we're still kind of outsiders. We're still certainly the minority, whether it comes to talent, especially as players in upper management positions. We're definitely a minority, but at the very least, we do see improvement.
In terms of the sort of how things have changed with whether that be because, and both of you work for teams who are now owned by professional sports organizations, but sort of like more professional, further background organizations coming into this rather than, bootstrapped up companies, and sort of there was sort of being some culture there in terms of respecting women and giving them those opportunities. I want to sort of ask, how has it changed for you all in the past couple of years in workplace culture and everything you've seen, whether that be in your own companies or in terms of other companies you've had the opportunity to work with?
Yeah,
Yeah,
before I started
you
working,
start.
before I started working full time at Dignitas, I was working in just a traditional Fortune 500 insurance company in marketing, and obviously you'd have your usual training about and diversity events. And now I feel like it's just within the last 12 months or so, we're starting to see that trickle over into esports. Our ownership groups are bringing their HR training, their diversity events to our esports teams, and we're part of that full culture now. And I think that helps. And our players are getting that training now too. And I think both of our teams have good stand-up players, and they know what they should and shouldn't say. But it helps to kind of get that corporate level of reinforcement, like this is important. It's diversity in our staff, in the content that we create. All of this is important, and we're now getting that from our ownership group, and I think that's great.
I think you're actually fortunate here on this show today to have probably two of the most progressive orgs in NA regarding that. We have female teams. That's already like a big step compared to most orgs, and the same can be said for everything that has been happening with the Madison Garden people and pushing their initiatives towards CLG. But I'm not gonna lie and say that we're behind as an industry in esports. If you look at what happened in sports and how there's much more women involved onto, like, if you just watch ESPN, for example, and you check out any of the desks, news hosts, and side interviewers, like, you see a lot of women. They're involved everywhere at any level, and it's incredible to see the progress that we have seen in sports compared to esports. And I think our progress is extremely slow. You see more and more women, but it's at a rate that is kind of, like, I would say the last 20 years within the esports industry, players working for orgs and whatnot, it feels like it has almost have no improvement. I don't want to say that because it's not true. Like Heather said before, we were probably 2 or 3 then. Now we're probably like 10, 20, ratio-wise. But, it's still crazy how many jobs are not being filled by women and how there's almost no women competing still.
Yeah, I think the sort of the misogynistic take is certainly that there aren't women, and particularly on the executive side of things, or the non-playing part jobs in esports, there aren't women who are either qualified or interested in participating in the industry. I know that not to be true. I meet women all the time, young women who are coming out of college or looking to start their careers, who are talented and do qualify plenty for those positions and have those skill types. But I do hear something I hear from a lot of those women is it's very intimidating to look at the industry, and it's not that they're uninterested, but it's that they can be intimidated by sort of some of the barriers to get into positions like the two that you all hold. So in terms of breaking those down, I mean, what do you all think is something that I guess everyone can do, and sort of the steps forward to make it a little bit more inviting to women trying to crack into the industry on the professional side of things for the first time?
I really think it's up to orgs like CLG and Dignitas to normalize females working. Like what Steph talked about is before in a private conversation we had, she does this weekly show about what's happening in CLG, and she's always the face of that. At Dignitas, we're doing media constantly with our women's Counter-Strike team, our female content creators, and I'm very often the spokesperson for all of Dignitas. I know, Jacob, I gave you a quote last week for our League of Legends team. So we really need to normalize this because, we have the experience, like you said, we have the knowledge of the games and esports, but this has to be you can't as a fan look at a team and see all males. You're not going to feel like you can be a part of that as a woman. So it's really on our organizations. We take it upon us to essentially be pioneers and show like this is normal. Like there are great qualified women in our space. And we're trying to do a better job of it. We try to evangelize it with other teams, other tournament organizers, that it's very important to put women in the spotlight with men so that those girls that want jobs can see like this is normal and they do belong.
In the end, I think that everything that Heather just said is spot on. It's a choice. It's a choice you take. And to put in perspective, like what we're going on right now with the Black Lives Matters movement, especially in the US, it's the same thing. It's a choice that you take as a company to support diversity, to support equality. It's not something that you can just say, yeah, we love women, and then just do nothing in the end, right? So you need to say, we will decide to make or want to make a difference and change our org and change the culture. It's a culture thing. Like even at CLG, I assume it's probably like that for you, Heather, at Dig, but it's something that we kind of have to remind everyone every week, every day, every meeting, that equality and diversity is a choice. And even if we have a female team, we have to remind our other players, our marketing, our staff, like everyone, where's the women, where's the diversity in that post, where, because sometimes you don't even realize that you're not inclusive, even if you have a female team, right? So it's a choice to change the culture and make sure that every employees know that it matters. Every player supports each other's, and you make a difference. Like, we have a equality committee now at CLG. We create all these kind of initiatives inside to make sure that we understand as staff. And then after that, we can come on shows like that and talk about it. But if we don't, make a difference and fight for it within our own org, it's kind of impossible to just say, yeah, we love women, Women's Month, Women's Day, like go moms and stuff. But it's way more than that. And I think that, and I hope that eSports is going to realize that at some point, overall, that it's a fight that has to be done. Tournament organizer, organizations, viewers, Twitch platforms. It has a battle that has to be done on all fronts to have more women involved.
A lot about sort of what's going on within your companies, and it's certainly respectable, the sort of the work and groundbreaking work that all of you, both of you, are doing to sort of push that forward and make both your companies more welcoming for women in the future, to work alongside you and to work for you. I want to talk a little bit about the community itself at large. One of the things is it's hard to change people's opinions on the internet, and unfortunately, the internet's a place where you can go find a bunch of unsavory opinions, more generally, and sort of find other people who think like you and sort of reinforce that opinion. One thing that is certainly not unique to Counter-Strike, albeit I tend to notice it a lot more, and I think others do also, is there are some top community figures who sort of do peddle, barring misogynistic opinions, that are certainly seem very hurtful towards women. In terms of, though, having outward groupthink and sort of changing the opinion of the community and pushing that the opinion forward, to allow for it to be less intimidating outwardly for women to even just be fans of Counter-Strike, right, and be engaged in the community. What are some actionable steps you think that the Counter-Strike community can take to sort of talk about that more forwardly and sort of push forward?
Very hard question. I think that's something that Heather and I have fought for over the last 20 years. I think there's hundreds of small steps that we can do. From making sure that if we do want to create a diversity and welcoming tournament in our platform, we talk to the right, the key person to support that. For example, any key, and make sure that Twitch chat, the casters, the tournament organizers are respecting equality values and whatnot. Because, even sometimes in the rules of a tournament, it might be uninviting for women, and or just totally wrong. Like, doing a female tournament, what does it mean in 2020? It's completely different than when it met 10 years ago. Do you want to include the LGBTQ community? Like, how does it work? So it's much more complicated than just wanting to do something. But for the people at home, I like to think, like, what if you had a daughter or a sister that wanted to play competitively, and she was trying to make it as a pro level in any esports game. And if you were watching her play, and if you would read these comments about her, or if you were watching her cast, or if you were watching her do something and you care about this person, how would you feel reading all the comments and the harsh memes and whatnot in chat or on the forums, and what would you do to support her, right? I think that's what it comes down to. I feel that because esports has always been very freedom of speech, and we just let whatever happen, we kind of forget that there's humans behind. From my personal experience, I know we've talked about this, Heather, in the past, but also I've talked about this, Pensy, Potter, people in the community, and we have to look at our peers' feedback, because the community's feedback is almost impossible to get from, to feedback from. It's too hard. It's way too hard. And honestly, you just will give up even before you start. By just watching Pensy cast and reading the chat, if you're a woman, you're probably discouraged to do exactly what she does. So I do believe that it's surrounding yourself by strong people, and the community just being held to better standards. I've seen funny memes about women casting. I don't remember what it was. It was maybe an interview or whatnot. But the meme in chat was like, I don't know why you're talking shit about this person. She's my girlfriend. She's beautiful. She's smart. And everyone was pasting that in chat over and over and over. And every time that woman was on the desk, people were spamming that. And I thought that was great. It was kind of a way to lift her up, but have fun with the community about, like, she's on, instead of saying girls and all these stupid things, so there are ways to be kind of memey, but in a positive way. Yeah, so many things to say.
I mean, yeah, like you said, like, Steph and I have talked about this for years. We've thought about it for 20 years. There's not just one thing we can do. If we could have, we would have done it already. But one of the most important things, I think, to me is, I'll start with, I firmly believe the number of cruel and toxic people are the minority. There's not that many, but they also have the loudest voice, and that's why you hear them. One of the things you can do as a player is if you're in a game and someone's making fun of a woman in the game, don't laugh at it. Don't acknowledge it. That's one of the worst things you can do. Maybe you're not saying something terrible, but by just giving that person the acknowledgement that what you said is funny, is you've already done a huge disservice to us women. So it's really about just silencing or ignoring a lot of those voices. A lot of that's not going to go away. Unfortunately, that's just the way of the internet. But what you can do, your part, is do not acknowledge that, and better yet, obviously, especially if it's your friend, shut it down. Like, say that's not funny, you don't appreciate that. Like Steph said, what if that was your sister? What if that was your girlfriend? That's one of the smallest little things you can do as a community member, is to not acknowledge that whatsoever.
So with the coronavirus outbreak this year, a lot of events have been canceled. A lot of tournament organizers aren't necessarily don't have the funds to be able to continue to operate, and I'm sure from the limited amount that I've seen, but I'm sure that's affected women's Counter-Strike tournaments as much as it has all the other ones. And it seems like it's been, at least running through my brain, it seems like it's been a while since I've seen anything about a women's Counter-Strike tournament of any form going on. And certainly some of the best teams in female Counter-Strike are spread across the world. And so I want to ask you all, how do you feel about the state of female Counter-Strike in 2020, given all the other circumstances like COVID-19 affecting what that circuit looks like?
The pro level, it's probably the best that it has ever been. There's a lot of tournaments. Right before COVID, obviously, there was a lot of tournaments There was I think the salaries are pretty decent. But at the amateur level, and I would say grassroots level, is probably the worst it's ever been. Just because outside, of Dignitas, CLG in America, there's not much competition. There is, but it changes all the time, and it's fairly small. Well, before you were able to do North American tournaments, right? Now you can't. There's two things about this. It's might be because women are less interested into also being part of women's team, and or are just playing other games because there's so much competition now, and that's fine. As far as the international tournaments, it's the worst. There's just no tournaments right now. Everything has been canceled. We saw DreamHack announce the NA and EU event, so that's cool. At least there's going to be that in 2020. But yeah, I don't know. I feel it's been pretty stagnant for the last couple of years. I think that tournament organizers are not really renewing the offer. It's really just like one tournament for pro teams only. There's not much going on underneath. And we're not celebrating women that are playing with guys either. It's really a showcasing a group that's already in a way successful. So I don't know. I have mixed feeling. I think that we should be much further in our progress in 2020. And unfortunately, if you look back, we had women competition in 2003, 2004. It's almost the same thing, a yearly event. Nothing changed much.
I mean, that's honestly what I told our Dignitas women's team when COVID started. I said, you should plan for a situation where there's possibly not another female event ever. DreamHack has come through with something. I think it's a great event. Both for Dignitas and CLG Red, we are competing in other events. We're playing in ESCA. We're playing in various qualifiers for events. So we're staying active, but I do worry for that more amateur female scene right now. That being said, as much as we love Counter-Strike, we're just happy for more women to be involved in esports, and Valorant is honestly a great gateway for that. Steph and I are both in a Discord she set up with a bunch of female players from every different community you could imagine, getting together and playing some FPS games.
I did want to ask about that because I saw the announcement that DigFE will be playing in some Valorant tournaments throughout presumably the next couple of years. But I do want to ask generally in terms of getting women involved at sort of the basic level of playing and competing, climbing the ladder, et cetera, getting sort of widening the mouth of the exposure to get more women involved in the games in the first place. I think for every person on this call, there's a generational thing here, right? The fact that we probably all grew up in an era where it was girls play with Barbies and boys play with video games and whatever else, right? And we can't fix that. That's immediately, right? It's something that it's not our fault, or it's what our parents sort of instilled into us, and we're doing our best to make things more inclusive together. But generationally, there is an opportunity for us as role models and mentors to have children and teenagers and sort of open the mouth and let them come into our world with no sort of stigma attached to either gender. So I want to ask from that perspective, do you think that there's still an opportunity to do that for young women in Counter-Strike, or do you think that ship sailed and maybe there's another game like Valorant or something else to bring more women in and make it a little bit more inclusive in the beginning so that when the pro scene starts to form and age, those women have been there all the way from the very start?
I'll start.
Yeah,
I mean, CS is a tough one. It's we don't really see young females necessarily trying it, and I'm talking young as in 13, 14, 15, which are some of the girls actually that we're crossing paths with in Discord Valorant games, which is crazy because we could be their moms, and that's insane. But yeah, it's honestly, I see Valorant as kind of a gateway as well to CSGO. You saw, I'll take Pokimane for example. I don't think she played CSGO before. I don't follow her actively, but because she saw Valorant coming out, she's like, okay, I got to get my FPS skills up. and she started playing CSGO. And, I have some female coworkers at Dignitas that wanted to jump in Valorant because it's the new hot thing, and now we've played CSGO together. So I'm actually thinking that it might be something like you start with Valorant, and then you've kind of crossed into this more like hardcore FPS, and then you move on to CSGO. I'd like to see that happen. I don't see CSGO going anywhere. The player base for the last 5 months, I think it's broken records for being a 20-year-old, depending how you argue it, a 20-year-old franchise. I think that's impressive, and it's not going anywhere. So maybe Valorant will bring people to CSGO.
To see it as in like if you were a guy starting a new game, not just the women, like CSGO is definitely harder. Like, the top players are at such a high level. So to reach that level, it's already, we're talking like 1 or 2 years of practice for sure. So even for anyone, just because of how hard it is. And we saw it with like all the players that were MDL or kind of semi-pro and all transitioned to Valorant. So if you're a woman and you want to start a new game, I think that right now, yeah, Valorant is probably the entry point. It's much easier, potentially will grow just as big as CSGO. And I do believe that it's a lot less, I want to say, you said that earlier about women getting into esports, a lot less scary to jump in because everybody's kind of starting fresh, right? CSGO, you're even at the lower ranks, you're playing with players that are actually pretty decent if you compare to what Valorant is at the moment. So, so I don't think it's over for CSGO, but I do believe that it's going to get harder and harder to get women's in, especially with the lack of initiatives that we have right now across amateur CSGO, not just women's CSGO, just across amateur CSGO and even semi-pro CSGO, how like it's so hard to get any money in. Like I can't even think outside of Mountain Dew and their MDL initiatives, I can't really think of any like grassroots or lower tier CSGO events that actually is sponsored and not community driven, right? And because of that, it's even harder to create initiatives for women to jump in. It won't be organic. So any esports game at the moment, it will not just be organic. Exactly what you said, Jacob. It's like the girls that are about 13, 15, a lot of them were still raised with the pink and Lego mentality, pink and blue, Barbie and Lego. So, so when we raise our child and our children, I think it might be a little bit different. I think maybe in 5 years, those kids will have like parents that are like, I will make my kid wear yellow and like pink and blue and whatnot. But I think we're not quite there yet.
So we'll end on this. I appreciate both of you joining me very, very much and always insightful. But, I think I've met women who have both of you as role models in their lives. And so I want to ask you this. Who are your role models? And this doesn't have to, other women who are your role models, and this doesn't have to be specific to esports.
Well, mine was a teammate of ours, Alice Liu. She doesn't play anymore, but she was the superstar of our younger days. And she was just as good as the guys. She was incredibly competitive. And I always looked up to her. And then I finally got to play on a team with her in 2012 and win a championship, and that was amazing. So that's who I grew up to. Yep, it's up there somewhere.
Trophy. That's literally the 2012 trophy that my Heather and I won together.
That was it. There wasn't anyone. So it was hard, and I feel like I moved at a much slower pace than women do now because they have people to talk to and ask questions and follow their tracks, and I didn't. So it took me a long time to win that trophy and a long time to find my place in esports, but finally made it.
Yeah, Alice too. She was my inspiration, and she actually, when I got recruited on her team too, I that was it for me. Okay, let's go. And then we won 5 World Cups together, and one with Heather, that trophy there. And then I would say I had a big gap like Heather where I had no one. And you took the words out of my mouth. It was you had to make your own path. But I think now the way I do it is, first of all, I get inspired by people on my side, instead of having someone I look up to, like everything that Heather does, or that like what EG's doing, and Flight Class Trisha, and all these other women that are breaking the barriers. But people that are not in esports. I know this is gonna sound so cheesy and cliche, but like I read stuff that, for example, Michelle Obama writes, or other activists like that, AOC, or anyone that can inspire me at the moment. They don't have much role model either, and they're doing great things. So I try to look for my peers and everything great that they've been doing.
Well, we appreciate you both, your trailblazing and your very lovely and important contribution to our industry and to your teams. sapphiRe and missharvey, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Jacob.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much to missharvey and to sapphiRe for joining us. We really enjoyed that conversation. We're going to be right back with one more talking about Valve and Valorant patching, and how Valorant may be making Valve patch a little bit faster than normal. Stay with us right here on the Eco. Thank you so much again to sapphiRe and missharvey for joining us. But before we let you go, here's one more thought. Over the last couple of months, we've seen Valve patching Counter-Strike Global Offensive more than ever. We've seen updates to things like Dust 2 doors, which have been a complaint for many, many years, even dating back to pre-Counter-Strike Global Offensive when that map was in other games. And we see them taking community feedback and responding to it about player behavior, about many other things that happen in Counter-Strike every single day. And I can't help but think that this may be because of Valorant. A couple of weeks ago, I wrote a column on ESPN.com saying that this was the opportunity for Valve to respond. It's not really been an issue for them about having a competitor because, strictly, no one's really made a tactical FPS that stood the test of time in the Western world. There are other games like Crossfire and others in South Korea as well that are Counter-Strike similar, sure, and they dominate those markets because Valve's publishing ability in Asia is actually very small. But now they have Riot Games, one of the biggest game companies in the world, considered a AAA developer owned by Tencent, who has more power in China than most companies in that country. And this is probably for the first time, one of the real times they've had a real competitor. And so what I wrote 2 months ago, was that this was the opportunity for them to step it up. Counter-Strike Global Offensive has pioneered this genre. Counter-Strike as a franchise has been there for 20 years, as we just mentioned in that interview. And there's a reason because it's been that way, and that's because it's a really good game. And I don't think anyone would say otherwise. But one thing that Valve has not been good at is engaging its community. You've probably read about some of the workplace culture that happens at Valve, where nothing is sort of aligned as desks are on rolling wheels and they move back and forth, and there seems to be no consistency. This is the opportunity for some of that to change. Dota 2 and League of Legends have their own card lanes, but League of Legends is the bigger one. And it was bigger before Dota 2 was, frankly. That's not the case with Counter-Strike and Valorant. Counter-Strike is top dog, and Valorant's looking to take away that title. Whether Riot likes to say it or not, they can acknowledge that Counter-Strike's so great, they have many people on staff like Volcano and others who come from this game. But this is the opportunity for them to listen, and to provide feedback, and to engage. And rather than being an overlord that continues to service their game in the way that they have, really to give the opportunity to give back, and to talk, and to listen, and to take that feedback and act on it. And it seems like the past few months, whether they'd like to say it or not, that is what they're doing. So I hope that continues. I hope as the year continues, as we hear more about RMRs, and we hear things about the major and what 2021 looks like after the coronavirus is presumably over. Hopefully, I think we're all crossing our fingers that that will be the case. 2021 can be at least somewhat of a normal year after the crazy one we've had this year. I hope that Valve is very front-facing in what they're doing, because I think it's very important. Because Riot Games will be, because they're dealing with players who come from communities, not Counter-Strike necessarily, but others like Overwatch and others, where games teams aren't very communicative with their top players. And Riot's trying to make best on that. I've talked to many players coming from all those different titles, Overwatch, Apex Legends, etc., that say that is what Riot's done very well so far. So Valve, here's your chance. And these are good steps forward so far. You listening to something that people have been talking about for a long time, like Sponge and them tagging him laughably in the in the Dust 2 Doors situation. Yeah, that's a good step. And I'm happy. I'm glad to see that even after 8 years nearly, Counter-Strike Global Offensive is still getting updates. It's a free-to-play game. They've got to find ways to get more people into it, because as sapphiRe mentioned, just more generally, it's not a very welcoming game, because it's actually quite difficult to play. But it is a good game, and it's a big top esport for a reason. So good steps so far, Valve, if you're listening. And I hope that throughout this year that continues to be pushed forward. But that's all for us, folks. We appreciate you joining us this week. We will be back next week with more discussions around Counter-Strike Global Offensive. We love having you here. We love bringing you on various different guests. Thank you again to sapphiRe and missharvey for coming on. If you want to catch up on previous episodes of the Eco, or this one if you're just tuning in a little bit late, you can go over to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/ESPN Esports. You can find us on Twitter at ESPN_Esports. You can find me on Twitter at Jacob Wolf, and we will have more Counter-Strike Global Offensive content coming to you soon. So thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next week.